Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University.
Welcome again. We are here for the video lectures of software engineering. We had started with block 2. We have seen unit 1, and here is unit 2, and we have seen in the previous session. Right now, let us see what we did in unit 2. Unit 2 is all about software testing techniques, right? And in the last session we saw was the need of software testing. What is software testing? Why do we require testing, right? And what is the purpose behind testing a software, and from where does it start? It starts from the very initial phase of SDLC life cycle, and it completes the entire cycle till the deployment process. My testing is continuously done. We saw various kinds of testing, right? That is the different techniques of testing, right? That there were actually 13 of it, and we even saw what is white box testing and black box, which are the one of the most important testing techniques, that is white box and black box. All right, today we will be seeing is functional test plan and process of testing. All right, now what is let us start with these today's session. What is function test plan? All right, from the name itself we can understand what is a plan, right? What is a test plan actually, right? So it does not mean with the testing of underlying implementation of application components, but it relates to testing of application from the customer's angle. All right, now whatever we are developing is something that our customers are going to use, or maybe the end users would be using, right? So with the perspective of my customer, with that vision that my end users are going to use it, all right, the planning that I do, the functional testings that I do, all right, the kind of testing that I'll be doing is nothing but my functional test plan. All right, it checks how the application is meeting business requirements and specifications. Now here in particular, my customers would be giving some sort of requirements. Of course, we call them as business requirements, all right, and they will be giving certain specifications. Now in order to meet that business requirements and that particular specifications, we actually have a function test plan which checks whether we are actually fulfilling all the business requirements. Are we actually fulfilling all the specifications mentioned, right? Then it says it serves as a dynamic document. All right, it is kind of a documentation that we prepare, all right, and it is dynamic one which keeps on changing, that must regularly reflect continuous changing of business requirements. So if any requirement change comes, it turns up, then my documentation also, that particular document also should show that effect of the change, right? So it is a dynamic document. All right, here is a test plan. It is a simple example. I hope you can see the diagram here. All right, now here if you see, there is a development team involved. All right, development team checks for the functional requirements, that is the foundational requirements that is given by the users. All right, and it has functional test plans. All right, they check both of this, they generate report results. All right, that report results will be revised every now and then. All right, so report result is given to the business community for its reviewing. There is a reviewer, all right, involved into this. A reviewer will give the report to particular business community, who will check whether the the requirements were there. Are those requirements being fulfilled with the test cases that we build up or the test plan that we do, all right, and the reviewer will give that particular report to the business community. All right, that result will be reviewed, all right, and again it shall be, if it is not matching a particular specific requirement, all right, then we have to generate another test plans. All right, so functional test plan results are created, they are executed, and every time it is done by the tester. All right, so tester is the one to whom my development team will give its development code or the code that is there to be tested. Alright, the tester generates the functional test plans. There are reviewers who will review whether the particular requirements are being fulfilled with the help of my test plans or not. They will revise it, they will check the report, they will analyze it, give it back to the business community, and if it is not found suitable, if that code does not pass my test plan, alright, then that that code, the software product code, is again revised. Alright, so this is a simple diagram. Now here sorry, it says a developer will cover what all things when you actually prepare your test plan. Alright, as a developer, as a coder, what you will cover? You will first cover the test cases. Alright, now what are test cases? We will see to that. We will cover the developer will cover the expected results. He or she will tell that when you execute this particular code, this is the output that you will get, the expected results. And they will cover pre and post test setup. Alright, what test setup requires? Alright, the pre things, the predefined things, the pre-processed things. Alright, then after the test whatever is done, alright, what the post measure steps are there, that is post test setup. Alright, the tester will execute the test plan whatsoever is being prepared. Alright, the tester will execute the test plan with the use of actions which is highlighted in every test case and records as per the results. Alright, so my tester will check the test plan. According to that test plan, he will perform the testing, and whatsoever the report is generated will be documented in form of result in a separate document. I said it will be documented in a form of a result, which serves as a duplicate copy of function test plan with actual test results. Alright, now it says that my particular developer would have given the expected results. Right, now it checks this expected results. My particular achieved result will be this one, right, which my tester will check. So this result, that is my actual result, will be checked with my expected result, whether they both are equal or not, will be documented in form of a sheet, or maybe a separate document will be prepared. Alright, and all this thing is done by the tester. That particular testing, the document that my tester has prepared will be given back to the reviewer. The reviewer compares the actual test result with the expected test result. I said that expected will already be given by the developer, right, and there are actual test results which is done by my tester. Both of this will be given to the reviewer, and reviewer compares the actual test result with the expected result and calculates whether the test case is passed or failed the functional requirement. Alright, let us see how it actually looks. Okay, functional test plan consists of what all things? First, it consists of the update history that includes the names, dates and update descriptions of the document. That it includes the document purpose. What is the purpose behind this document? It includes all the functions, alright, the list of functions that are being tested, and carries the use case diagram also. What is the use case diagram, right? Use case diagram is something which states that what all actors are there, what all processes they can actually undergo, they can perform, right? And it's like giving you the major idea about your system. Alright, then pre-test setup is there, which carries the instructions where test cases require persistent state to run through the step. Alright, when you need a persistence, persistence means the continuous one, the whole time one, right? So when you need a persistent state to execute, to get some result, alright, that all comes into pre-test setup, alright. And there are test cases. Test cases are the one which are very important, and they are observed very, they are given much more weightage, alright, by the testers, by the reviewers and the business community as well. Test cases, it carries list of test cases in which each test case verifies set of clear defined functions. Some certain functions will be already defined, will be mentioned in my test case, and all those functionalities will be there in my test case, alright, will be listed inside my test case. And it will check for valid users accessibility to the system and also declares that valid users cannot access system without entering into that particular plan. Alright. So, without that particular password. So, it says that my test case is something which is being observed thoroughly with perspective to my end user and is all done by my testers. Right. Let us see what it is. The very first thing it is my functional test plan will have is its scope, right. In unit 1, maybe probably in block 1 unit 3 we saw what was project scope, right. And there we saw that scope is something which is very important, right, and it actually gives us the basic idea about our document, right. So, documentation always starts with the project scope. Right. Now, here also functional test plan scope will be given. Now, in scope list functions that are tested, and out of scope means list functions that are not tested. So, here it gives in scope and out scope. So, test plan scope will contain what all functions they have tested and what all functions they have not tested, alright, those are which are not listed. Then, second point it contains is functional test plan assumptions and constraints. Okay, we have assumptions and we have the constraints. Alright. Now, assumption, list the functional test plan assumptions, what you have assumed. Alright. All those assumptions are being placed into this particular thing, while functional test plan constraints are nothing but list the functional test plan constraints. That means all the rules, the constraints that you have, that this is needed, this much is needed, right. All those validation check and all comes under constraints. Alright. So, all that is listed in point number 2. Alright. Then we have point number 3, which is functional test team roles and responsibilities. It says that who is going to perform what kind of testing. Alright. So, we have to list the names of particular testers whosoever are there. Alright, you have to add those names, you have to explain their roles and what they are responsible for, explain those responsibilities. Then, in the fourth criteria or the fourth step, this say is functional test entry criteria. Alright, it says that whatever ID is there, ID 4.1 entry criteria. For example, you have first is a registration login page. If you do not have a particular login ID, then you are probably redirected to the registration page, then registration page is there, right. So, this flow which is there, that flow is nothing but your entry criteria. Alright, so it says that whatsoever factors that are involved inside your software code that you have constructed, alright, all that is checked with its functionality as well, comes under the entry criteria. Then there is functional test cases. Now, this test cases are nothing but case 1, case 2, 3, 4, 5, whatsoever comes up. Alright, it includes the test procedures. Alright, whatever you have done, the modules, the functions, the classes that you have tested, the functions that you have tested, the methods, alright, within the class that you have tested, all that and its expected result, what is the expected result, whether it is proper or not, all comes under the criteria number 5. And sixth one is the one which generally is being reviewed a lot. It is nothing but a functional test result. So, lastly my results are prepared and it says that whatever the ID is there, which we have already mentioned in test cases, ID, alright, then test cases, what is the name of that test case and what are its procedures or functions being used, and whether it has passed or failed, alright, pass or fail, who has tested it. In that list we have the tester's name, right, who has tested it and on what date they have done this. Alright, all this is prepared and then this result is passed on to the reviewer, who compares that this was yes the expected result and this is what actually the testers have got. Alright, and whether it has passed or failed. If it is passed, it is a green signal, but if it is failed, that means it needs some rework, right, it needs some reconstruction of the code, right. So, this is my function test plan. Alright, next topic is process of testing, which is very easy. Alright, software testing strategy is a roadmap which is used and followed by developing team in order to maintain the quality. All right. So, in order to maintain my qualitative software, in order to construct a qualitative software, all right, always a software testing strategy is being used. All right. Software testing strategy is something which tests all the possibilities that are there to have my code as a big failure. All right, and on the basis of that testing which is done, all right, I want to build up a product which is going to be thoroughly is capable thoroughly to pass through any of the errors that is there. All right, it will thoroughly go it will avoid all the errors, all the bugs. All right, so that is nothing but my software testing strategy. All right, and it says that it serves as a bridge between customer roadmap which shows steps to be conducted at the time of testing. All right, then the fundamental test process comprises of 5 different activities which are again easy. First one is planning. Right, before you start with any testing technique, all right, we first have to plan that what we are going to actually test, what kind of testing we are going to have. All right, whether it is going to be no internal mechanisms will be checked, so whether it is going to be a black box testing, maybe we are going to check the internal code also, then it is going to be white box testing, whether it is going to be a simply performance testing, maybe stress testing, right. All those is requiring some plan. All right, and we must always understand that nothing happens without a plan, right. So, be it coding, be it testing, be it designing, analysis, anything, but everything requires a plan, right. So, it starts with planning. Then second is specification, because whatever I am going to test, if I test it simply without any specification, then there is no comparable result, right. So, whatever I am going to test, is it going to meet particular specification list? So, specification should be there. All right. Then we need is execution. All right, now we are going to actually execute our test plan, right. Whatever the coding that we have done, all right, whatever coding we have done, we plan a test for it. All right, we have already mentioned the specifications for it. Now, once we are ready with the test plan, we are ready with the specifications. Now we need to execute it. That means we start the testing process, right. Then next is recording, all right, which is very important. It says that you start executing, yes, but you simultaneously need to record what that whatever testing you are performing. All right, this is the result into it. Next, I start with test number 2. This is the result with that. Next, I start with test 3. This is the result of it. All right, we keep a record of it. All right, and lastly is checking for test completion. Then it turns up to the completion of your particular testing technique. All right. I hope you can see everybody of you would be seeing one diagram here. It says test, planning and control. So, very first thing is planning. We plan what we are going to test and how we are going to test. Then test, analysis and design. I said that anything that we do, maybe analysis, design or anything, needs first a planning. All right, then we test, analysis and design. We do the testing of the analysis of the testing techniques, we design the testing techniques, then we start the implementation and execution of the testing. Then we have evaluating exit criteria and reporting it. All right, so that means we evaluate what is my exit criteria, what were my entry criteria, what were my exit criteria, we evaluate it, we generate a report and we report it to the reviewer, right. And test closure activities, once everything is done, we close that testing techniques, all right, and that is completion of my testing technique, right. Here you would be seeing first one we will see is test planning. All good testing is based upon good test planning, all right. Everything that is done, everything if it is going according to whatever you planned out, then that means your planning was good, all right. For this, an overall test strategy should be planned along with project test plan. So, when you are actually planning your project test, all right, the testing of your project, with that only certain testing strategies also should be already well planned. The test planning activity will generate test plan which is specified to level of testing, all right. So, that level of testing, to reach that level of testing, we have to of course first plan the test. Now, next step is test specification, all right. It says that in this, the fundamental test process shows activity related to as designing of test cases with certain techniques which to be followed at the time of planning. So, whatsoever at the time of planning we would have asked, or maybe we would have suggested, or we would have actually thought of, alright, all that are actually mentioned on the test plans, and that is nothing but our test specification. It says in this, specification can be considered as entirely a separate task which includes identifying the test conditions. We identify what kind of test conditions we are going to use, alright, what are different testing techniques and what are the conditions related to it, alright. Then we see and we design the test cases, alright. We already so what is test case, right? So we design a test case according to that, alright, and it says we build the test cases, right. When we say we build the test cases, we have designed already. Now when we start writing whatever the testing we have performed, whatever its output is, alright, what all the things which we have done, alright, then we call it as building a test cases. So test planning, then test specification, alright. Then next is my test execution. Now we have already planned, we already have a specified list of it, alright, we have already prepared the test cases, already designed it, and we now start evaluating it, alright. We call it as execution, that is test execution. It says the idea of this is to work with every test cases which can be done either manually or with test execution automation tool. Nowadays there are a lot of automation tools available for testing, alright. So nowadays people do not prefer much onto manual testing, right. So there are various automation testing tools, and they simply feed into that tool, and that is how the analysis is done, alright. So probably on the basis of the test specifications that you have built up, alright, those test cases are then given to, maybe they are checked for manual testing or they are given to the automation tool, alright. It says here the way in which test cases are executed is significant, where most important test cases should get executed first, alright. Here the prioritization of the test cases is done, whether this particular test case is having very high priority than the other test cases, then that according to that prioritization testing is performed, right. Next is recording of the execution that you do. It says recording of test is done in parallel with the test execution. So when you start execution of it, along with that only the recording is done. I said in the previous one only that when I actually do the testing, right, I said test case 1 is I am doing test case 1, this is what output I have got, so I record it, I write it into a document. Test case 2, this is the output what I have got, I again record it, alright. So recording is going to be a simultaneous process with your test execution, alright. For this we need to record versions of software under test along with this specification, and for each test case the outcome is recorded along with the test coverage, alright. So whatever the specifications we had, with that specification it checks the testing execution, that means the actual result and the expected result which we had in the specification, both of this is checked, they are recorded, and that is prepared in the recording, alright. And lastly we have is checking for the completion. Now what is checking for completion? It is very easy one. It says this will check the records against completion criteria which gets laid off for test plan, alright. In order to now close my certain, there are going to be lot many test plans, right. In order to close my certain test plans, I have to see whether all the testing is done or not, whether it is according to my specifications, whether the recording is done, I mean the writing of that document, whether this is test is passed, this is failed, whatever the documentation is to be prepared, all this recording is done or not. And once it is done, we check for its completion, and there is where we end our test plan, okay. So this is the last point where we end our the test plan, right. So process ends here. Let us sum up what we have actually done in this entire unit. In this unit we learnt first core testing techniques. All right, it says that there are two major testing techniques. One is black box testing, another one is white box testing. Again, repeating it in a very a gist of it. Black box testing is not going to check the internal code of your system. Apart from that, it will check all the external things of your system that you have developed. So it checks the input, it feeds the input and it checks the output, whether that output is matching according to the customer requirements, the customer specifications or not, comes under my black box testing, right. Then we saw was white box testing, in which we actually check the internal code also, right. So white box testing is something which says that apart from the input and the output, it checks whether whatever the branches you have used, the loopings you have used, the structural, the conditional statements you have used, alright, all that kind of coding, what kind of code you have prepared, what is the logic behind it, alright, and what are the other internal files included into your code, all this will be tested in your white box testing, right. So we saw two core testing techniques. Then we saw different testing techniques, wherein we actually saw 13 kind of testing techniques, right, which includes starting from the white box, black box, of course it is there, right, starting from the unit testing, then moving to the integration testing, where we saw what is top to bottom approach, top to down approach, and bottom up approach, alright. Then we saw what is regression testing, what is end-to-end testing, right, and I even mentioned that there is something called as sanity testing, right, and it is very important, right. Then we even saw that our functional testing, of course we know that black box testing is also known as functional testing and white box testing is known as structural testing or glass box testing, right. So we saw different testing techniques. Then we saw what is functional test plan, right, how to prepare test cases, what are test plans, how do we plan it, who are the testers, we have to write their roles, we have to write their responsibilities, and then preparing a test plan for each individual test cases, right, and then recording it and giving it to the reviewers, and what is that test plan we saw, right. So functional test plan we saw. And lastly we saw is process of testing, that means what are the major steps in order to carry out testing. So testing, of course any of the thing that we do in software engineering, everything starts with a well defined plan, right. So we need to define a plan. So it starts from planning, moving from planning towards the other rest of the steps, right. So that comes under process of testing, alright. And here we end our block 2 unit 2, which is all about testing techniques, the functional test plans and the process of testing. We will start with unit 3 wherein we are going to see the acceptance testing more in detail, right. We have already seen what is acceptance testing, but more in detail we will be seeing in unit 3. Here I conclude with block 2 unit 2. Thank you so much.